Welcome back to Driven to Extremes. In part 2, we'll continue our look at selecting the right team members to join you on your own expedition. I'm Mac McKenny from Mac's Adventure. We're expedition specialists with 25 years experience of operating vehicles in the most extreme environments on Earth. I'm fortunate to have joining with me Steve Holland from SJH Projects, who I've worked with for many years now. He also organised the team selections for the very first expedition that I ever applied for. So how do you go about setting out an actual selection process in order to find out the qualities of the potential candidates?
Oh, having done so many of these, we sort of have a generic program now and all the equipment sort of ready to go and boxed up and things like that. But you do have to adjust appropriate to the aims and the nature of the expedition. Yeah, if it's a vehicle-based one, that will be different to a paramotor-based one, or a whole host of other things. However, the sort of principles behind it are the same, and there are three sort of aspects that we use that give us the payback in a weekend, or perhaps even an extended weekend, which isn't actually very long to find out what you need to know. So, things we do. Sleep deprivation is your friend. You find out a lot about people when they are tired. Sleep deprivation can be used as a method of torture. We don't quite go that far, but we definitely use it. We also, right at the outset, when we have our welcome slides, if welcome's the right thing, we put up things saying program. You will be told what you need to know when you need to know it. Now, you wouldn't think that would actually be a big deal, but turns out it is, because people like to know what's happening. It gives them a sense of being able to try and pace themselves and mentally sort of prepare themselves for exactly what's coming up. Well, the world doesn't work like that, and expeditions don't work like that. You may have a plan, but actually you don't know what's coming around the corner, and you don't know how long you are going to be at a task or in a situation until it ends. So we don't give them the program. One advantage of that is if we have to change the program, they don't know. So yeah, makes life a little bit easier for us. The other thing we do, which again you wouldn't think would be that big a deal, but in this age of Facebook likes and Instagram hearts and whatever, we don't give them any feedback during the weekend. There's no, oh, that was really good, or oh, you messed that up. We actually just be inscrutable as best we can. Sometimes give the game away by laughing at them, but there we are. So they don't know what's coming next. They don't know when they're going to get any sleep, and they don't know how they're doing. They don't know if they're acing this or failing miserably. And in the end, all they can do is be themselves. And that's what we're trying to get down to, trying to get past this sort of veneer of the image that they like to put forward and find the real person that's lurking in there. And that real person might be great, or they might be a nightmare. But that's what we need to find out. And it often takes the whole process right up until sort of late on a Sunday morning for us to be sure. I mean, we've got pretty good at spotting early on who we think are likely to do it, but there are always people who surprise you, and you need the whole process and working on those principles. It's not what people are used to, but it applies to the situation to which they are trying to be part of. Now, having sort of got with those principles, it's then how do you actually go about it? And one of the things, and I alluded to it a bit earlier, is we get them together in whatever building or facility, and they all sleep in the same room or the same couple of rooms on the floor in their mats if there's no beds and things like that. And we deliberately pile them on top of each other because that is a good way to find out what this person is like in close proximity out in the field for an extended period. So let's get that sorted right from the outset. Doesn't bother most people. It's sort of what they're expecting, but it does bother some. We had one where this candidate insisted on, well, I see what you're doing, but I've got a nice camper van outside. I'm going to sleep in that. And it's like, well, okay, I can see why, but that's not what you were asked to do. But, we'll just observe and note that and move on. We get the candidates to do all the cooking and cleaning. It means we don't have to spend our time doing it because we've got a lot of things to do in the background ready for planning the next stages. But again, they're practical tasks that you need to know about in the field. Can someone cook? Or if they can't cook, tell you that they're dangerous in the kitchen, but they'll muck in with the washing up and the cleaning up and all those other things. We also generally don't set out a rota of who's cooking what when. There's a pile of food. These are the meals that we need to prepare for. Sort it out, guys. And then that's almost like their first command task on the first evening is sorting out the rota of who's doing what when. And that's when personalities will start to come to play as to who feels they should be in charge of everything and who's just a sheep and will just do what they're told. And all of these sort of things you're looking for start happening by default, but with real world practical tasks. Another thing we do on these is it's not just testing people. We actually do a lot of teaching. In navigation over multiple sessions and vehicle marshalling and communications, all sorts of things. Partly because that time spent in the classroom with sort of death by PowerPoint, if you like, and they're tired and they're knackered, but they're having to absorb information that they're then going to have to process and use, is another way of putting pressure on them. But also, come the end of it, only some of your candidates are going to be successful. Those that aren't are then going away with practical skills, either that are new to them or they've brushed up. They found something out on navigation that they didn't know. I've been teaching navigation for donkey's years. I will very happily sit in on someone else's navigation lesson because there is always something new to learn or a different aspect of doing things. So that they come away with something even if they're unsuccessful. We feel that's important as well. So everyone's a sort of a winner to some degree. And they also learn a lot about themselves as part of these processes. Now, with the navigation, we find that we've taken people who were put off it when they were at school. They haven't done it for 20 years. They've got a real mental block about map reading, which a lot of people have. And they've then found themselves leading a leg of a night navigation exercise through the woods in the dark, knowing exactly where they are, knowing exactly what they're doing, and in charge of other people. And they feel brilliant. It's like, wow, I can't believe that I managed to do that. So that's good. We have teamwork exercises. Some of them have adapted from what might be considered to be like corporate team building events, which I think are largely a waste of time, but they've provided tools and exercises that we've adapted to give people tasks, and then we can observe their personalities as they undertake these tasks. So they're really just a vehicle for us to watch people. Communications, really important. Now, this isn't so much operating a radio. It's more, can they put across their thoughts clearly to other people? Because if you are in a remote situation, you might not be able to chat face to face and have the body language and all of that. You might have to be communicating something quite complex over a radio or sat phone or whatever. And everyone needs to be able to do that. As I say, the expedition leader might be incapacitated. We need to find out whether people can or have the confidence to do that sort of thing. Again, written exercises, because you have to be able to put your ideas down clearly. And it's another pressure. No one wants to be writing an essay at 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's very good for us to read and see who can think clearly when they're tired. And again, a sort of an element of command, task, stroke, public speaking. Can someone actually stand up and express themselves in front of a group? Because while you are out in the field, it might be that any one of your team members could be the one who ends up talking to the media. And you need to know that they're not going to let you down, and that they can look at a camera and speak clearly and say what's what without having a complete mental block and making you look unprofessional. So all these people will reflect upon you as the expedition leader. And then we also create sort of high pressure situations with the unexpected, usually later on when people are properly tired. And they can be very telling, because you tend to get the three sort of types. You get those that charge into the situation without thinking, and then the classic thing, they might then become a casualty themselves or make a bad situation rapidly worse. You need to know about them. Then you've got the ones in the middle who okay, stop, think, okay, yeah, this is what we're going to do, form a bit of a plan, doesn't have to be very detailed, and then get on with it, communicate their ideas and step up, and things happen, and that's good. And then you have others who just fade quietly into the background, who are very pleased that someone else has taken charge of the situation, and I am just standing by here ready if someone happens to give me a job, but if they don't, that's fine by me. And we're usually standing further back than they are, in the shadows, quietly watching and observing, because we know these types are there, and just sort of seeing who's who. And it often there's a surprise as to sometimes someone who's been pretty good will then fall into the sort of first or third category rather than in the solid sort of stable middle group. And you need to know this stuff. Other things that we do, or personalities that we sort of look at, and certainly things like while you're wandering around the countryside of Devon or Wales or wherever we happen to be, on a night navigation exercise, carrying heavy, awkward equipment. One of their team members is sort of leading that leg. You maybe have a deputy navigator, some check pacers, all that sort of thing. But there are some of the group who at that stage are just wandering along in the dark, not knowing really how long they're going to be out for. And they start grumbling. And I remember walking along with this person, because we go along as sort of sheepdogs at the back. We will let them get lost, but we know where we are, and let them then solve problems. But this person was like, well, this doesn't reflect upon the trip that we're going to be doing. I don't see why we're doing this. And it's like, you are acting in exactly the way that proves why we are doing this, because you are a grumbling pain in the butt that this exercise is designed to expose. So thank you very much for proving my point, was the conversation I had in my head while we then carried on for another few hours. And it was very telling. This was the same person who insisted on sleeping in the camper van rather than with the group as well. But, proper team player, very good person, very capable, but as an individual, not a team player. Then you'll find other people that emerge. The sort of what I might call the mother hen, who is not necessarily female by any means, but they're the ones that take on the sort of a lot of the pastoral role of looking after other people and making sure other people are okay. And you need to create that situation in which they can expose or bring that to the fore. And it's not how hard or physically strong you are or whatever. It's just a sort of an inherent trait people have that is very good to know about. And they can sort of act as like the team glue. Because you as the leader are not always there. Like on the flight of the Swan, Sasha, the leader, was actually at 1,000 feet or whatever in her paramotor for many hours of the day. And it was the rest of the team who were then moving vehicles forward and kit forward, and they were having to sort out their dynamics, and then their leader would emerge with, hair all over the place, face covered in snot, utterly exhausted and frozen, and the team then needed to look after her. And then at different stages with the TV and interviews, she became the face of it, but other people had to adapt their roles and look after the other team members as they went along. There are those people who sort of rise to the occasion as it gets harder, which is why I say you need an extended period and time for these people to expose themselves, which is why we don't make the decision. Well, obviously, we don't make the decision till the end, but sometimes it takes that full process for some people to really come up and shine. They've been quiet. They've not really been hugely noticed as you've gone through. But then when it gets hard, they're the ones that have emerged and held things together and motivated other people. You get some who get really hangry. Once they get a bit tired or a bit hungry, they become a nightmare. Now, again, that's important to know about yourself. When I and my partner, we used to do what's called the now, the original mountain marathon, used to be called the Kim years ago. I knew that I would sort of decline gradually. I would get a bit grumpier and a bit whatever as I got hungry on a fairly sort of linear decay. My partner for the first however many of those, Kevin, was like like Tigger or the Duracell bunny, and was just a complete bundle of energy, but that would then fall off a cliff and just go from yay to complete and utter nightmare in the flick of a switch. Now, that's okay, because that's just how he's made. But that's something you need to then know about people and find out about people so you can compensate, and also know that, that's all right, that's normal for him. Give him a Snickers, please, and we'll move on. And so that is something important to find out. As well as the dominant people, you really need to know who are the mice or who are the sheep who will never, ever make a decision. They're happy to work hard and do stuff, but don't ask them to ever make a decision. Well, the time may come when they have to, and you need to know that they can. And there are some people who basically will refuse to ever make a decision and always look to other people. And you can't really have that. Great, they want to work within a hierarchy, but you need to know that they can if they need to.
We're mainly talking about vehicle expeditions here. It sounds like a lot of the stuff you do is very physically demanding. Are the selection courses, just a physical beasting, or is there a bit more to it?
The selection needs to be appropriate to the expedition you're planning for. However, they don't need. They can be physically demanding in terms of they go on for a long time and you don't get much sleep at all, and so they are tiring. But they do not need to be a physical feat unless you are planning a physical type of expedition where people are going to be pulling heavy weights across the tundra and that sort of thing. Then you up the physicality. But generally, they're to find out about people's personalities and work ethic and skills and a whole host of other things that you can't find out if they are just dragging 5 tires across a field for 12 hours a day. You're almost wasting an opportunity. There's a lot more you need to find out about them as team members rather than just how physically strong they are. It's how mentally strong they are that is the important thing. So you do adjust. There is a place for just a beasting to see if people can take it, but actually that's pretty rare. Not the best use of the time and the opportunity. We want to find out about them as people, and actually we found that when you've given people quite a hard time, but come the end of it, it's very surprising how much you get in terms of thanks for having done it, and people actually say, wow, I learned so much about myself, and or it turns out I had a bit more skills than I thought I had or had confidence in, or I didn't know anything about that and now I do, or that's the first time I read a map for 20 years and now I feel like I want to get back out into the hills and things like that. So they just beasting people, no, it's a waste of time. Making them work hard, but in interesting and useful ways is much, much better.
So how would you go about selecting people in particular for vehicle expeditions, especially if they're heading off to potentially, remote parts of the world, far from help? Obviously, it's quite important that there's an additional element to their skills and their character and their experience to add to the whole selection process.
We have the same sort of template, but as you'd expect, we use vehicles a lot more on the actual process itself to bring that out. Now, one of the key things is, vehicles are heavy and potentially dangerous. So we want thinkers. On a vehicle-based expedition, things can go very badly very quickly. It can happen within seconds that everything has gone from being fine to being in potentially life and death situations. That, most importantly, could have been avoided. So what we need to try and bring out, because there are lots of people who can drive, but we need to find out who can drive in the way that is going to get everyone and everything to where it needs to be in a functioning state and still talking to each other and all of those other things. So one of the key things is sort of like, the mechanical sympathy side, which we bring out a lot with sort of marshalling and things like that. So it's not high-speed driving, it's slow maneuvering and precision maneuvering of the vehicle under command of other people. You may find that you're actually driving this vehicle blindfold and you are utterly relying on other people and not just flooring things and hammering things and off you go. So that's important. We also find it's important that people are honest about their driving skills, abilities, and their limits, and this sort of thing. Now, doesn't mean that if they expose a lack of experience in some particular aspects, that's an issue. You're after selecting the personality type, and you can train those skills later on. But you don't want someone who's bluffing about their skills, and then turns out the moment you need those skills, they haven't got them. So that's important. You also need to have those people, because they might think, unless they've done this sort of thing before, that, I can sit behind a wheel and drive for 12 hours a day listening to a playlist and whatever. Actually, if you're going somewhere remote, a lot of your time is going to be out of the vehicle. You're going to be wading rivers to check they are safe for the vehicle to cross. You're going to be getting down, lying in the mud, looking to make sure that the diff isn't going to hit that rock that you've spotted. And it's not so much the vehicle's going to get you there, it's you're going to get the vehicle there. And certainly on the winter crossing of Antarctica, had these great big bulldozers and sledges and things that, they were providing the power and the heat that were keeping people alive, but the mechanics were very, very much keeping the vehicles alive, and how they were driven and how they were looked after, so that it sort of worked both ways. It's not just press the pedal and go. You are coaxing this potentially actually fragile piece of equipment through an environment that's out the limits of its capability. And you need people who are prepared to do the work and do the detail to make that happen. You also need to know that these people aren't going to leave your tools and equipment scattered from one end of the country to another because they were just leaving things behind. We did one with sales team from a specialist Toyota dealership who do a lot with NGOs and things like that. And we were teaching their sales team how to live and use their vehicles in the same way their customers did. And we broke them up into teams, and they had this scenario where suddenly they came across a vehicle ridden with bullet holes and a casualty covered in blood and all the rest of it. I remember one of the teams, they dealt with everything really well, but in terms of then loading the casualty into their vehicle to take them to help, they were like, oh, we haven't really got room for all of this. So they actually offloaded some really important equipment, left it on the ground, and drove off. The very same equipment they would have probably have needed half an hour later. And you need people who actually can think ahead, think of the consequences. And you do a very good bit on training on this without giving away, but about the logical order of who's in what vehicle in a convoy and things like that. We need people who can sort of work that out for themselves, or understand the reasoning behind it and see how, I can see how that would prevent a situation suddenly getting a lot worse, and take on that sort of mentality. People who can recognize when they're getting tired, so rather than just bluff it out and then have an accident driving into a camel in the middle of the road, they will be honest and say, do you know what, I am just having a really, really bad patch, and I know it's my shift, but I have to stop for the sake of everyone. And it's those sorts of things. Basically, with vehicles, it can go very wrong very quickly. People need to be of a type that anticipate much further down the road as to what could happen. And that's what you're looking for and trying to create those scenarios.